IsraelNationalRadio.com present the Tamar Yonah Show.
I have joining me today Dr. and Rabbi Marvin Antelman. Welcome to the show, Rabbi.
Thank you very much for having me here.
So we're going to find out today, who are these people behind the scenes who are possibly infiltrating our organizations, the Jewish people, our media, our education, all sorts of spheres of life. Who are these people? Who can we trust? And where do you fit in this devious agenda for control in the world? So, Rabbi Antelman, you were telling me before we started the show that this happens to be the time of the 250-year anniversary of the Council of Four Lands. In Hebrew, you say that as?
Actually, it's the 250th anniversary of a special cherem, which was an excommunication and a ban that they issued. And it's very, very pertinent to us today. And I'll try to bring the connection. First of all, let me say this. There are a lot of conspiracy theories out there. I'm not interested in theories. I'm interested in facts. So the scholarship over the years that I've utilized are sources that are impeccable. For example, Anthony Sutton, professor at Stanford University, wrote 2 books. He wrote more than 2 books, but 2 books which are relevant to what I'm going to speak about. One of his books was Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, and Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler. There he goes through a lot of trouble to document the connection between the leaders of the Council on Foreign Relations, which is an acronym also for Carnegie, Ford, and Rockefeller, who provided the main funding for this.
Interesting.
And he's a professor with impeccable credentials. And then there is the late Professor Carroll Quigley, who was professor of political science at Georgetown University. Matter of fact, he was even quoted when Clinton became president in his inaugural address. He quoted Quigley as one of his people that he had studied under. So Quigley was very well known. The CFR loved him, and he decided that he would do a very nice thing. He would reciprocate the love and put out a book called Tragedy and Hope. But when it came out and it spoke so much about the CFR activities that they didn't want people to know about, they turned against him. And he himself then reassessed his position with them and wrote a book called The Anglo-American Establishment, where he claimed that a handful of people were running the world. And those 2 books are impeccable as source material, but there's other impeccable source material, and that is the scholarly works that were put out by professors at Hebrew University to deal with what we call the Sabbatian conspiracy, which I'll go to in one moment in our history. Let me preface those remarks by saying that, as every Jew well knows, right out of the Haggadah, and every generation, they're out to destroy us, and every generation has its killers and persecutors of the Jews. In the 17th century, it was Chmielnitsky, who headed the Cossacks, who was out to destroy Jews and did terrible atrocities, killing hundreds of thousands of Jews in Poland. The atrocities were terrible, and to commemorate this terrible series of events, the Jews kept a fast day, the 20th day of Sivan, to commemorate this, which was this past Friday, commemorates the Chmielnitsky massacres. Today, it's no longer an active fast day, but it was observed for a few hundred years. In any event, on the 20th day of Sivan every year, the Vad Arba Rotzot, which is the Council for Lands, which is the biggest tribunal of its kind at that time, met once a year on this date and took up questions of Jewish law and other things.
So these were very big rabbis, leaders of the community, who were on this Council of the Four Lands.
The Council of Four Lands was backed up by no less than the King of Poland. It began in 1520 and lasted till 1764. It consisted of 30 rabbis, 15 of who were lay leaders and were rabbis, and the others were not lay leaders. They were full-time rabbis. They were dealing with a problem that was a byproduct of the Khmelnytsky massacres. What happened was, when the Jews were massacred like that, people were speaking again about redemption. We were looking around for redemption. And all of a sudden, a man by the name of Shabbatai Tzvi, who was born in 1626 and died in 1676, came along and said, "I am the Messiah." And he had a tremendous following. When it was realized that his following was so great and there would be problems, the Sultan, because Shabtai Tzvi was from Izmir, came along and gave Shabtai a choice. Either you die or convert to Islam. So he converted. Now, there were about 1 million followers prior to the conversion. When the conversion happened, then there was disillusionment among the Jews. But there were some diehard people who set up different cults of Shabtai Tzvi. And the worst one of them was called the Domeh, which was a secret organization. And the Domeh was based in Turkey and in Salonika. And the Domeh gave rise to these terrible orgies that went on, which became part of the immorality theology of Shabtai Tzvi, corrupted later on. He apostatized himself 10 years before his death. So when he died in 1676, he had these cults doing all kinds of evil.
And the reason that these followers of Shabtai Tzvi were doing evil was because what?
Here's the thing. The Talmud says that the Messiah would come when everybody's good or everybody's bad. There is such a saying in the Talmud. So the Sabbatian said like this: it's impossible for everybody to be good. It's easy to be bad. So they turned around the Torah and they said, if you do an evil deed, then you will use up the energy of the universe, and it'll collapse, and you'll force Messiah to come because you will have used up all the evil in the world. So whenever they engage in an orgy, they would make a bracha, and every day they would figure out a way to do as many sins as possible. Like if you eat chaylev, you're chayav karet. In other words, if you eat fat, according to the Torah, you're to be excommunicated from your people. So they would eat fat that was prohibited, non-kosher fat, from a kosher animal, which is chaylev, which is in that category, like eating blood from a kosher animal.
So they would dafka do the opposite.
They do the opposite
in order to hasten the coming of the Messiah, which is totally ludicrous. These sound like people who were today fodder for all these Davidian, David Koresh cults and all the strangest cults you can find today. Would they be the same type of people?
Same type of people, exactly. As a matter of fact, what happened was then after that, after Shabtai Tzvi died, one of the most powerful Sabbatian cults, as they were called, was a transformation of the Domeh, the most extreme cult, to Europe through an insidious person by the name of Jacob Frank. He died in 1791. Now the Frankists started to spread and take over entire communities and make them satanic. Matter of fact, no less a personality than the Nobel Prize winner Isaac Bashevis Singer describes how a community was corrupted in his Satan in Garay, which is based on very well documented history. So one of the sources that I use is the late Professor Gershom Shalom, who wrote a lot about Shabtai Tzvi. Shabtai Tzvi, the Mystical Messiah, is a very, very thick book in Hebrew and in English. It goes through a lot of things. So to say that he was involved in conspiracy theories is ludicrous, because he has documented studies. There are other professors also, through Gershom Shalom, that were involved with their students at the Hebrew University and still continuing the Sabbatian studies, as they're called, because of the influence of this insidious group. And you can actually trace a line historically, which I do in my book, to the CFR from Shabtai Tzvi, and another organization called the Illuminati, which was founded in 1776 by Adam Weishaupt. and they were involved also in the French Revolution, which is also well documented.
So what you're saying is that there really does exist a new world order, that it's not a conspiracy theory, it's a conspiracy. And you're a scientist, so you only deal with facts. You don't like to go on hearsay or on jumping to conclusions. Only fact. You've done research and you come to the conclusion. You don't have to come to the conclusion. It's right there in front of you. You've gathered the facts to show that these are conspiracies that are going on in the world. There is indeed people working in a new world order to try to make this, to try to take over the world power. That's what you're saying.
Right, and there are so many books on the side of the Jewish philosopher that it'd be very ludicrous to compare it, let's say, to the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is fiction. So some of the professors at the time of Gershon Scholem was Jacob Katz. Professor Katz wrote a book called The Jews and Freemasonry, which gives a history of the interface between Jews and some of the cults that derived out of Shabtai Tzvi. But the next big cult that came from Shabtai Tzvi after the Domeh organization, which is in Turkey, the next big cult were the Frankists, as I mentioned with Jacob Frank. So Jacob Frank, the Vad Arba Ratzat, the Council of Four Lands, wanted to deal with Frank, and they decided to have a big excommunication on the 20th of Sivan 250 years ago. And there they made the following rulings. They said everybody that is a Frankist is to be excommunicated.
From the Jewish people.
From the Jewish people. Bastards to the 10th generation, is what it said. And they prohibited people, because the Frankists were into Kabbalah, they prohibited the study of Kabbalah until you were 30 or 40 years old and you had a belly full, as they said, full of Talmud. Only then could you study the Kabbalah.
Right.
And they said they're women or whores, and they're hereby excommunicated from our people to the 10th generation.
This is what the Council of Four Lands labeled the Frankists, right, because they so deviated from Judaism and all that Judaism holds to be true and righteous. These people went off and made basically their own deformed religion, and so the Jews wanted nothing to do with them. They kicked them out. That
is correct.
Okay.
Now, studying the Frankist family trees, there was a family called the Bushka, which is like first cousin of Jacob Frank. Gershon Scholem spent 6 months in Paris at the National Library to ferret out things about the French Revolution in connection with the Sabbatians. So you can't dispute this material. There's a direct line with the Jacobin Society and with the Illuminati. And Gershon Scholem writes concerning the Bushka, he said he was a member of the Illuminati, but he was devoted to Sabbatianism.
Are there non-Jews that joined this Sabbatian cult?
No, non-Jews did not join the Sabbatian cult, but the non-Jews did join the Illuminati.
And they worked together, and you're saying that these two cults or organizations or whatever had planned and staged the French Revolution?
Yes. They were involved in it, and Gershon Scholem proves it with the personality of the Bushka, who was taken and he was beheaded on the guillotine because of his involvement.
Wasn't the French Revolution ultimately, I mean, forget about the beheadings because that was horrible, but wasn't it ultimately good? I mean, democracy came from that. You got rid of this, spoiled upper royal class, and the people took over. Wasn't that a positive thing?
There were positive and good things about it. The question is, let's start assessing it from a spiritual side. After the French Revolution, there was the ascendancy of the reform and conservative movements. Interestingly enough, you start studying who the leaders were of the conservative reform, you'll find a direct line to the Sabbatian families in Europe of the Frankists.
So they infiltrated back into Judaism and made these cut-off religions. They formed conservative and reformed Jewry.
Right.
Okay, because before that there was only Torah-observant Jews. You were a Jew, period.
Right, and there was solidarity among all the Jews. After Shabtai Tzvi, you couldn't trust anybody anymore.
Mm-hmm. Where is Shabtai Tzvi buried, by the way?
He's buried in Albania.
Do people go and visit his grave? And
I understand they do. It's a Sufi shrine.
It's a Sufi shrine,
Sufi,
which is Islam.
Sufi is a Gnostic movement in Islam, which seemed to have been a tremendous influence on the Sabbatian movement. And the Sufi go all the way back in history, prior to even Islam. And this business about virgins being a gift if you kill for Allah came from a particular Sufi cult, which were also Illuminati, according to one of the experts. Spence, who wrote an encyclopedia on the occult, claims that one of the Sufi cults were the assassins. Why are they called the assassins from hashish? The people would have hashish, and Hassan ibn Saba, the old man of the mountain, had a bunch of people that would assassinate people, and because they had hashish all the time, they were called assassins. So he equates the Illuminati with this movement, the old Illuminati prior to the 1776 organization of Illuminati. Now Hassan ibn Sabah, being the old man of the mountain, as he was called, had a tremendous amount of influence in Islam, and that entire Sufi cult. The interesting thing is that he set up these places where they smoke hashashin, were luscious grounds, beautiful, luxurious places with lots of grass and flowers and fruits, and virgins. So this business about the virgin and the reward was done there by Hassan ibn Sabah.
That's where they get their idea of heaven from.
Right.
Huh.
That's where that came from.
Interesting.
You know. But this is all in Spence's Encyclopedia of the Occult. He himself, Spence, the author, was a Rosicrucian. That's another Sufi group. I don't want to go into the Rose Cross. So that's where that came from.
So you're saying that there are all these different organizations. One is the Sabbatian cult, which are Jews that were kicked out of Judaism. There's the Illuminati, which were not Jews. They were Gentiles who had their own little secret thing. You've got today's Skull and Bones Society that we heard about with Yale University and President Bush and many many famous politicians today.
Professor Anthony Sutton wrote about that in depth, too. He was the one that I just quoted earlier as being the author of Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution and Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler. So Anthony Sutton has written about that. He has a separate book out on that. Now I can tell you that in my 2 volumes, I start showing straight lines from the Illuminati and the Frankists, the Haskalah movement, the Jacobin Society, the Reform movement, and different years that initiatives had. The Illuminati were involved to destroy the Bible and biblical authority and to help promote biblical criticism in the university level.
You know what, let me stop you here because we have to take a break for the news, and then you can go over and explain this all to us, how everything adds up today and where we are today in world politics and policies and agendas and who's running things. So, Rabbi Antelman, what you're saying is that a lot of this started with a cult of people who thought that Shabtai Tzvi, who lived in the 16th century? Or the 17th century.
1626, 1676.
Okay, he claimed that he was the Messiah. In the end, he got so many followers that he was a threat to the kingdom, so the Sultan said either convert or die. He was jailed. He was put in prison. He chose to convert to Islam, lost a lot of followers, but there's still some hardcore members, and they took what he was teaching and they perverted it even more, and they decided that in order to bring the Messiah, we have to have everybody sin. So the world gets to such a low level, God has to come in and save us. That's basically what their philosophy was?
Yes, but they also considered Shabtai Tzvi to be God.
To be God?
Yes.
Okay, we're really dealing with sickos. So this council of the four lands, these rabbis, said anybody who has anything to do with Shabtai Tzvi, who believes, who is a Sabbatian, who is a Frankist when that came later, these people are excommunicated from Judaism. They have nothing to do with us. We do not believe in this stuff, and it's not Jewish, and they've chose to give up their Jewishness.
I want to mention that the Frankists were in existence already when the Council of Four Lands came up with this edict, because Jacob Frank was causing all kinds of problems in Europe at the time. He died in 1791, and he made an offensive into Eastern Europe and what today is Moldavia or Bessarabia.
Moldavia?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he had his cult very, very strong there. And so he was operating from 1753 already with initiatives 3 years before they came out with the pronouncement against the Sabbatian Frankists.
All right. And at the same time, there were other organizations of people getting together who were not Jewish, Gentiles, and the Illuminati, who had their own plans to try to get world dominion, or at least as much power as they could. And today, everything seems to be coming together. You see different blocks being formed in the world. You've got the European Union. It looks like there could be now a North American Union tying Mexico, America, the USA, and Canada into one North American Union. It looks like there's going to be probably an African bloc, a Latin American bloc, a Asian bloc, and of course Shimon Peres back when he brought us Oslo was talking about a new Middle East, which would be a Middle Eastern bloc, and yet these people still exist today. You're saying from these. I'm just going to jump ahead just for a minute because I want to tie it in for today, so it's relevant. These groups of people who are still trying to make their one world agendas to gain power and strength and money and everything that they're vying for here. They are trying to do this so they can have power. Who are these people you're saying? It's the CFR. Are there any other groups just like you had Illuminati who were in Europe? Is there a European-based type of Council of Foreign Relations, CFR, think tanks that are guiding governments and infiltrating into different movements to steer people to go one way or another?
There's the Bilderberg group in Europe. There are a lot of groups that run in tandem.
Are they Jewish, the Bilderbergs?
No, absolutely not. The thing is, though, the genius of the Arbor Rotzot, the Council of Four Lands, was to put a Gentile label on any Jew that started to get involved in these derivative organizations. So it's out of the fold completely.
So these people...
So any Jew that gets involved in the conspiracies comes out of Judaism. The fact of the matter is that...
Leaves Judaism, in other words. They've left all of our values.
As a matter of fact, it was even reiterated at the time of Trotsky. Trotsky was excommunicated as a Jew, and the followers of the Bolsheviks in a tribunal separately meeting in the Ukraine at the time of the Bolshevik Revolution.
So are there still Sabbatians today?
Yes. It's interesting that you should mention this, because after I wrote Volume 1 in 1974, and one history professor, which I bring down in my book, said as follows. He said that I took a quantum leap from Shabtai Tzvi to communism without any basis in fact, and I posited the continued existence of Sabbatians. And he was skeptical over my assertion that some groups continued to enforce their secrecy after over 300 years, and considered the notion absurd. But now he's changed his tune, because there was one guy who was a member of the Domes secretly, whose name is Ilgaz Zorlu, who wrote a book that was published in 1999 called Yes, I Am a Salonican. And there was a feature story that appeared in Jerusalem Report in 1999 on the book. Among the revelations was that no Sabbatian, with the exception of Ilgaz Zorlu himself, will ever publicly admit to being one. After centuries of secrecy and denial, Zorlu is determined to break the silence, to put the issue on the public agenda, and to prove that the Sabbatians are actually crypto-Jews and that their Muslim appearances are nothing more than a sham. Ilgaz is like a missionary. He wants to spread the work of Sabbatianism. Some scholars say the Sabbatians of Istanbul continue to practice many other of their own peculiar rituals. Sabbatian married couples gathered to eat spring's newly born lamb for the first time. After the meal, the lights go out and couples have sex without distinguishing between their partners. So he mentioned all this stuff, and he mentioned in his book that the Sabbatian cemetery, there's a tomb of a Supreme Court judge, for example, lies next to the ex-leader of the Communist Party. So once his book came out, people stopped saying those things about me, because here's a member of the cult exposing it.
Do they have some type of special power that they're so successful, the people in these cults?
Well, it's no different than the power, let's say you have a group of Freemasons who give each other business, or business people that join the Rotary or something like that.
So it's just a clique.
It's a clique.
And because they help each other,
Right.
they're able to put themselves up higher and higher.
Yes, out of the Dome came no less a personality than Ataturk, who was the first leader of the new Turkey, secular government Turkey you have today. The switch from Istanbul to Anatolia. He was a member of the Dome historically.
All right, why don't we go to some callers? We have joining us now from the virtual studio, we have Esther from New York. Esther, what's your comment or question for us here at Israel National Radio? Do we have Esther from New York from the virtual studio?
I have a question for Dr. Andelman. I thought I understood him to say a few minutes ago that the Sabbatians were connected with the foundation of Reform and Conservative Judaism. I would be interested in hearing a little bit more information about that, or some clarification.
Okay,
Thanks.
I'd be happy to do that. My basis for this is, first of all, Gershon Schollem's writings. There's one particular article which was very, very popular called The Holiness of Sin, which appeared in Commentary, which is based on the idea of mitzvah haba ba'aveira, a mitzvah that's derived through a sin, like taking a stolen etrog and using it to make a bracha. The Gershon Scholem is the one that did the research, and he points out that the leaders of the Reform movement were from the big, basic Sabbatian families. In his book, The Messianic Idea in Judaism, for example, he has a chapter where he visits the Brandeis family. And Brandeis family came from Sabbatians.
There's a Brandeis University.
That's right. Anyhow, Dembitz, which was also part of that family, was also a Sabbatian family, but Dembitz renounced their Sabbatianism in front of a Beddin. In any event, he shows that the Wheeler family and other families were identical with those families that started the conservative Reform movement. The Reform movement was started in 1845 by Zachariah Frankel, and if you look at his family tree, you'll see that his family came from the Wheeler family, which is a Sabbatian Frankist family. I discuss these families in great detail in Eliminate the Opiate Volume 2.
Do you have footnotes in your book so people can...
Oh yes, they can check it all out and trace it all. I have a chapter dealing with Solomon Schechter, which I call Solomon Sheker because of the disinformation.
Sheker means lie in Hebrew.
Right, where I go into great detail about what the conservative movement is all about, how they reject Torah min Shemayim, divine revelation of the Torah, and other things. Now today, the latest that I've heard on the subject is that the Jewish Theological Seminary of America is getting a new leader, and he wants to see a lot of the clergy in the conservative movement replaced by people who are lesbians and homosexuals.
Let me just jump in here for a minute. It seems to me that so you're basically saying that these families who are in this cult, these Sabbatians, have infiltrated into Judaism. They split Judaism. They made a Reform Judaism. They made another conservative Judaism to split the Jewish people. And I think that somebody was saying that now they've even infiltrated into Yeshiva University with what was, I just don't have the name at the top of my tongue. I'm sure David knows, but what's his name? From Yeshiva University, they just appointed him the head now? Do you know what I'm talking about? David, you can help me on this. Don't you remember we were talking about that? No one's helping me here? All right, when you remember, let me know. So basically, they're infiltrating, and let me just read something that you wrote in your book in the 70s here. You wrote here, and this is very, I can't believe you wrote this in the 70s, because we're only talking about this today, maybe the earliest in the 90s, about being politically correct. You wrote here, abortion has been converted from fetal murder to a right to choose. Homosexuality has been turned from a sexual perversion to a sexual preference. Assisted suicide from a felony has been changed to a right to determine one's future. Sexual restraint from an expression of human dignity has been turned into an anachronism. Basically, they were making all of these things that the world has held as immoral, making it acceptable. They're already turning people's minds and manipulating people to say that, no, these things are okay. It's not that you're a homosexual and you're doing an abominable act. It's just an alternate lifestyle, a different lifestyle choice. They're rewording things. They're putting cosmetics on all these things. And this is the way that they can get people to think and do what they want them to do. Let's go to another caller. We have joining us from Baltimore, we have William. William, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tamar. Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi. I had a two-part question. How can we see the influence of these groups of CFR and the others in the government and administration of Israel today? And two, we're talking about some very far-reaching and powerful people. What can the average person, religious Jew, Maikis B'nai Noach, do in their individual lives about this without being in a position of power to make any kind of important decisions?
In our Shemona Esrei every day we pray for the coming back and the redemption of the Geulah, the redemption. And if we believe this, especially if we can pick ourselves up and come to Israel and live, it will be the beginning of Itchalta de Geulah, the beginning of the redemption, which I believe events that have unfolded in the last years seem to show that God has a moving finger. But if we start supporting those people that have other ideas that want to see Chas v'Shalom, the destruction of Geulah, redemption, then we're in trouble. So do your thing, be observant, and be knowledgeable, like you're listening to Arat Sheva, which is very, very good. And as we all come together, Jews from all over the world, God will bring us to the ultimate redemption.
All right, so basically you're calling for Aliyah, strong call there for Aliyah. Let's go now to Washington, D.C. We have joining us Tom. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tamar. Thank you very much, Rabbi Dr. Marvin Antelman. What evidence do you have that many of the Jews, if any that is, that many of the Jews in the neoconservative movement here in the United States are false, disingenuous, or Sabbatian Jews, either knowingly or unknowingly, and that the neocons may have an entirely different agenda than most people would imagine?
I have not studied the neocons. I'm familiar with the neocons, and I have, at this particular point in time, I have nothing to say on the subject.
All right. Do people in the conservative movement know the roots of their beliefs that this is Sabbatian? Are they secret Sabbatians? And
when you talk about neocons, I saw the gentleman was talking about politically neocons, not the conservative movement of Solomon Sheker.
Okay, Solomon Sheker. All right, again, 1-800-270-4288. We only have about 8 minutes left of the show, so if you want to call in with a comment or question, if you want to talk to one of the smartest men in the world, you can do that right now, 1-800-270-4288. So we've covered basically the roots of these different organizations. You said, again, there's the Illuminati that was from Europe, and they were not Jewish. They've got this broken-off cult of people who left Judaism and became Sabbatians, and that's what a lot of people talk about, today about the New World Order. You had something on one of your on one website where you were talking about the dollar bill and the symbols on the dollar bill of the Illuminati, who are not Jewish, the pyramid and the eye, all-seeing God. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, there's a fellow by the name of Spencer many years ago came out with a book called The Cult of the All-Seeing Eye. Interesting enough, the Illuminati had a symbol, and that was an eye on top of a pyramid, which came from the Avodah Zarah, the paganism of ancient Egypt. Like Horus, and we ourselves have Baal Peor. We're coming up soon with Parshat Balak about Bilam, who's referred to as Shtuma Ayin, which they say was blind, but Shtuma Ayin, in my opinion, he was the the cult master, the all-seeing eye in his day. So this is an ancient symbol that came and is associated with the Illuminati.
What's with the Jesuit priests or the Jesuits or something?
Here's what it is. Weishaupt himself was at Ingolstadt University, which was a Jesuit college. So the Illuminati, the Bavarian Illuminati, was founded in Ingolstadt, which was run and dominated by the Jesuits. Some people say that Weishaupt himself was a Jesuit, but apparently, it seems anything I could find that was substantive, that was substantive as far as documentation was concerned, shows that he was involved with the Jesuits, but he himself was not a Jesuit.
So we've got the Jesuits, we've got the Illuminati, we've got the Sabbatians. What about the Pope, the Catholic Church, the Church of Rome?
They're still doing their old thing. But as far as the Illuminati itself were concerned, the anti-Semites have taken over the Illuminati as part of the Jewish conspiracy domination, and they're writing about the protocols, so they lump us all together. But some of them even say the Weishaupt was Jewish. Unfortunately, there's some people who take that stuff and they regurgitate it back to us and take it as a fact. Whatever Weishaupt was, he wasn't Jewish. But even if he were, he would have been automatically excommunicated by the Vad Abarotzat. The genius of Vad Abarotzat meant that any Jew or a person of Jewish origin, his Jewish origin was null and void. He was outside of the pale if he got involved with these things. Like we have in Sanhedrin, for example, in Perek Chelik, but these people do not have a share the world could come, and they list he doesn't believe that the Torah was revealed by God, etc. So we have our list of heresies that go all the way back, and the Vad Abarotzat was only building on those heresies.
So the Council of Foreign Relations, which is a think tank, they basically come together. It's an invitation-only type of group. Nobody off the street can join them.
No, you're right. And if you want to read more about them, there are a lot of books out on the subject. But as far as authoritative books, I would say that the two professors that I mentioned, Quigley's books are available, Tragedy and Hope, and the Anglo-American Establishment, and Anthony Sutton's two books on the Bolshevik Revolution and the Rise of Hitler, and Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler, and Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution are there if anybody wants to do documentary studies.
So now the CFR is one think tank that you would say is trying to get world dominance. They want the world to go a certain way. They're helping to make these blocks. As I said in another show, they're helping to make this this North American Union by the year 2010. Who's involved today in the CFR that we need to worry about? Who is in the Jewish world and in the American world today that is infiltrating into politics in these countries and these nations who want to see these nations weakened and destroyed? Who do we have to worry about?
Well, there's a whole list of them. You have to get the list. Which you can get on the internet.
Do we have to worry about Bush, Clinton?
Bush's father was a member of the CFR. Bush himself is not a member of the CFR. But just about the founder of the CFR was Colonel Edward House. And the CFR was incorporated in 1921, and he founded in Versailles in 1918, and there's a British counterpart. So in the Anglo-American Establishment, which was written by Anthony Sutton, he goes to great lengths to show then that the Arabs are a favored party of the CFR.
And so we have to. How dangerous are they?
Very dangerous. They want nothing more than complete domination of the world and the restoration of Plato's Republic. They conceive of themselves as the priestly and the ruling class of Plato's Republic, and they want to bring this new world society.
Do they think that they're doing this altruistically, that they're really good, or do they know that they're evil and they're just ambitious businessmen who they don't care about anybody else, they just want to have riches and power, and that's it? I
don't believe that they're monolithic. You have different personalities, and they all have their own way of locking in. Some consider themselves satanic. There are other groups that interface with them, like the Bohemian Grove, which is pagan satanic.
So you're saying some of these people actually are what some people say, that they're in these devil cults, the Skull and Bones, and that...
Or they belong to the Sufi, and Hastings Encyclopedia of Ethics and Religion goes into great detail into the Sufi and its satanic theology.
There's been some claims that some of these people in the CFR and in these elite groups that practice devil worship, black magic, that they really are gaining dark powers, and that's why they are so successful. Would you agree with that, or you say it's hogwash?
I don't believe in dark powers. However, you have nothing less than the United Nations itself having a meditation room, which is Sufi and Avodah Zarah, pagan in every sense of the word.
In the UN?
At the United Nations, in the meditation room of the United Nations. As a matter of fact, Spencer's book, Code of the Old Sinai, discusses it.
I don't believe it. We got to the end of the show. It was fast, right? I want to thank you so much for being with us.